And the first speaker today is an incredible lady. You might have heard her on Desert Island Discs talking about her experiences of coming to the UK as a 12-year-old refugee from Iran. And she is now the Bishop of Chelmsford. So could I ask you to pay attention to Bishop Guli? Thank you.
Well, I'm so delighted we have Bishop Guli, the Bishop of Chelmsford, joining us. You're a member of the House of Lords, you're a bishop, you've had personal experience of migration to the UK. Could you share a little bit of your story for our guests, just so they know why this whole question of migration and asylum and borders are important to you?
Yes, thank you, Krish, and it's really good to be here with you. Yeah, I mean, my story is quite an old one now in the sense that it goes back quite a few years. So I arrived in this country just as I was turning 14 from Iran, which had just undergone a revolution, which had impacted the life of the very small Anglican church community that I was part of, and also my family in particular. And so, yes, we found ourselves here as refugees originally. It was a different time in the sense that I think the whole migration, refugee, asylum question wasn't as politicised as it is now. There was a lot less suspicion around. So I often describe our landing as relatively soft compared to what many people experience now. That's not to say we hadn't been through some quite traumatic experiences which brought us here, but the actual arrival, you know, we arrived on a plane, so in a kind of legal or usual way, as it were, and we were dealt with kind of dignity and so on and so forth. But what I do guess I have a sense of sharing with refugees in all times is that sense of a dislocation and a sense of being far from home, the uncertainty, the need to find a new sense of belonging. You know, all of those things I think are probably common for everyone who migrates, particularly if they're refugees or asylum seekers and have experienced difficult, traumatic situations.
Can you remember a little bit about what it felt like, a teenager coming to a new culture? It's quite a difficult time in your life. You've got identity formation going on. You're trying to fit in and belong.
So I remember starting my new school in September, and that was really when the culture shock properly hit in. You know, I'd just come out of kind of a revolutionary Iran where life had been so disrupted. Schools had been closed for several months, and suddenly to be in quite a controlled environment with a timetable that I didn't really understand, in a language. I spoke English, but it was my second language. So I do remember the culture shock of it all. I looking back, I think I had to grow up quite quickly. I was very, very conscious. I was deeply conscious of the fact that, my parents were doing the best they could for me. I never resented them. I was never kind of angry with them. I just kind of accepted that this is how it was. And I worked through it. But I do remember the culture shock. I do remember not understanding. A lot was going on around me. But the flip side was I also suddenly had a whole range of opportunities and experiences that would never have been open to me otherwise. And I absolutely threw myself into those. And particularly the kind of extracurricular stuff around music and drama and sport and all that. So, you know, I have to also remember the positives and the opportunities that were coming my way, which allowed me then to begin to build a new life.
As you say, we've politicised migration and asylum. Why has it become more of a political issue and one that Christians seem to take sometimes opposing views on?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question, and it's one that we probably should ask ourselves more. You know, on one hand, migration is not a new phenomenon. I think sometimes we talk about it as if it's just a recent experience. Biblically, it's there from the word go. You know, Adam and Eve migrate out of the Garden of Eden. Abraham migrates. You know, it's there as part of our stories, as it were. I guess the reason it's become more of an issue is that the media enable us to see much more clearly what's going on. The stories feel much more real. We're aware of it. And therefore the numbers become more of an issue. People are acutely aware when we talk about 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is, several million. It comes right into our living rooms, as it were. And then you add that to a sense of discontent, often with people's own lives here. And it's very easy then to equate the two. So you jump from one situation, that we don't have enough housing here, the NHS is under pressure, our education system is under pressure, and you look for someone to blame, and it's really easy to point the finger and say, well, if all those foreigners weren't coming here, then everything would be okay. The truth is, for me, it's not a binary. It's not an either or. We do need to address some of those issues here. Around housing and education and NHS, but it's too simplistic to say that it's just because of migrants coming and taking our places. The reverse is also true. Arguably, the NHS relies heavily on many migrant workers, and in other fields as well. So there's that issue. And then there's the whole thing about, I think as human beings, we find it difficult to relate to people who are different from us. And the emotion it often evokes for us is one of fear. I don't understand that person. I don't understand their experience. Therefore, my kind of human instinct is to be fearful, to assume the worst of them, that they're all coming here to kind of feed off what our society has to offer. The truth is that we know that most refugees, asylums, migrants want to come and not only improve their own lives, but actually contribute to the society that they're part of, because contributing to a society also enables a sense of belonging to develop. We need to receive the warmth of welcome, but we also need to have the opportunity to contribute and to give back. So I think there's a whole amalgam of issues. And, there is something about the kind of populist, nationalist agenda, as it were. There is something in there, I'm trying to imagine the best of this. There is something in there about, a fear of the erosion of Christian values and a desire to protect those. Now, I think it's misplaced to say, therefore, we need to keep people out. But I'm trying to understand some of the reasons. A desire to retain a strong sense of Christian values in a world that is increasingly secularized, particularly in the West. So I think it's a whole amalgam of things, Krish.
What do you think the church's role should be? I mean, you live in this really interesting intersection, don't you? You're a Lord's spiritual, which means you represent the Church of England in the House of Lords, and you're someone thinking about the public welfare of our nation, but you're driven by your Christian values. So you live with this tension all the time. What do you think for Christians watching around the world that might be facing similar tensions? What do you think the church's role should be in this conversation about immigration?
I think the church's role at the local level is always to respond to need in the wider community in which it's set, whatever that need might look like. And in many of our parishes, that need right now looks like asylum seekers who are housed in hotels or unsuitable accommodation under very, very difficult circumstances. And so it's absolutely right and proper that the church should be seen as a place of welcome, should reach out to them. And it's hardly surprising in a culture where there's a lot of animosity towards them, this hostile environment, that many of them will respond to that and come for that warmth of welcome. And absolutely, as you've said, that's offered regardless of faith or nationality or whatever. We don't invite people and offer welcome in order to convert them. Some will want to explore Christianity, and we rejoice in that, and we support them if that is the case. Some indeed have arrived as Christians and have often fled because of persecution, because of their faith. So the church's role is absolutely to be blind to what people's faith is, what their nationality is, to offer warmth of welcome. That is the nature of the church since the day of Pentecost, people of all nations under one roof. It is not the role of the church to make decisions about who qualifies for the status to remain, citizenship, British passport and so on. That is the job of the politicians, of the Home Office, of the courts. So I think, I'm reasonably comfortable with that. That is not our role. We will support people through the process. but we don't do anything that isn't lawful. And in any case, even if we baptise people, that doesn't give them sufficient reason to remain. So I think they're distinct roles. And in the House of Lords, I'm mindful of that. I speak out of the experience of who I am. And of course, we're there, as you say, as Lord Spiritual, to speak about issues of morality and values and Christian faith from our experience of the breadth of the Church of England. And between us, as Lord Spiritual, we represent an awful lot of communities. So I think for the most part, people understand that. And I'm very clear about what our role is and what it isn't. And I speak out of that. But yes, frustration sometimes spills over, and we become targets of criticism for people who are feeling enormous pressure and stress about the issue of migration. It's really interesting because I think even those Christians, churchgoers that you might speak to who will say, I'm against migration or whatever, even those who might speak at the most extremes, when they get to know individuals, of course, their experience changes. And we have this capacity as human beings to hold in tension our kind of generalized views and theories about things. And then the particular experience that relates to the lives of individuals feels somehow different. We see that a lot. I see it, for example, around the ministry of women in the church. I'm against the ministry of women, but you're different. I like you because I know you, because I get on with you, or whatever it is. So we have this capacity to do that. And, for me, the church is always at its best at the local level. Yeah. And local Christians, people who feel they have no great power or influence, actually have a huge amount of influence in being able to demonstrate kindness and welcome to refugees, asylum seekers, anybody, not just people who come from abroad, but people who are in need in their wider communities. And not just about kindness in terms of what can we give them, but actually kindness in the sense of how can we make space for people to come and be part of our community, to contribute, and heaven forfend, maybe even change us in the process of that relationship developing. So that's really what it's about. I mean, I do what I can, I say what I can in the House of Lords and use my influence in ways I can, but actually at the local level, we have the opportunity to impact individual lives in a way that is hugely, hugely significant.